How are you going to do the skull lab when you're at home, or any of the bone labs? When you're in person, we'll be using models, and I will be coming around and assisting you. The first thing to know is that you want to learn everything that is on your checklist, and these are called labs. You will have 4 checklists. For each checklist, you will have a quiz with a word bank off of diagrams. Ultimately, you are going to be shown the models or representations of that if you're a virtual only learner, and you will have to identify those part as timed lab stations, and so it will become cumulative. So here is our lab sheet, and how this works is if it's not on this sheet, you do not have to learn it. There's more information in your textbook and in these online programs than what is required for this course. So, for example, for cranial bones, we need to know the frontal bone, the parietal bone, and the temporal bone. And then the temporal bone has some parts on it. There's a hole in it called the external acoustic meatus. There's a little pointy part called the styloid process, and so on. So you'll need to know those parts. Also, pay attention to things like this where it says know the number of cranial bones. That means you need to know that there are 8 cranial bones, and we will talk about that also. So now that you know what you're looking at, how do you know which bone is which? The best way is to use your textbook, and you see the name of the bone and then you find it in the diagram. Once you have the diagram and you know what it's pointing to, you want to find that on your model. In person, that will be a 3-dimensional model replica of the bone. But at home, when you're studying and using this lab time, we're going to use a program uh, at biodigital.com. So the first time you do this, you go to biodigital.com, and in the top right hand corner, click on Login. This will ask you to sign in. You'll notice there's an option here to sign up for free under the word Next. Click Sign up for free. And then at the top, it says Continue with Google. Click that, and then choose your Google school account. Now from here, I can go to Complete Anatomy, and there's some different options, but let's click on Complete Anatomy. It asks you if you want to click on male or female. For the purpose of this lab, we're going to be doing the skeleton. There's no significant differences in the names of the parts, maybe just the shapes a little bit. So I'll click on male um, just to pick one. Now, here we see the diagram, and in this case, it has muscles on it. We're going to only want to look at the bones. I can see at the top there's a progress bar loading this also, so just be aware of that based on your connection. Down here on the bottom right-hand corner, there is a toolbar, and the first thing says Open Explorer Tools. The next one says Search. This is a full screen mode, and then more options. And then notice over here we have one more icon that says Expand 3D Controls. You're going to want that. So when you click on it, it opens a vertical menu. We have Pan Mode, Zoom In, Zoom Out, and Recenter. So under Search, if I click that button, it opens up a new side panel for me, and it lists all the body systems. So what I want to do right now is see the skeletal system. Next to it, there's the 3 dots. Sometimes they call that the snowman. And if I click that under skeleton, it says hide, isolate, fade, or fly to. You want to click isolate. What we've just done is isolated the skeletal system. So all I'm going to see now are bones. Everything else is ghosted out. We don't need to do anything with the other systems. Now look at skeletal system. There is the little arrow here. If I click that, it gives me a drop-down menu to start to expand the subdivisions of the skeleton. So I've got appendicular, meaning my arms and legs, and I have axial skeleton, meaning my skull, vertebrae, and ribs, the core of my body. So let's isolate it further to just my axial skeleton. Okay, if I look at axial skeleton, I could click on that drop down menu and notice I could do just bones of the head. So let me isolate it down to just the skull, for example. And so you can get the views you want. If I need to, I can go back to recenter 3D model, and that will put it back on the screen. Now, how do these controls work? The first one is switch to pan mode. So watch what happens when I click this. It's now highlighted. If I click and hold and drag, I can move this skull around on my workspace. This is obviously very small. I'm going to click the plus sign. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Now notice as I'm zooming, it's kind of going off the screen. That's why I'm on pan mode. I can scroll down to be able to look at it. But it's kind of angled, and I'd like to be able to get a better view. So that first option that I can toggle between by clicking on it is also to be able to rotate it. So right now I'm on rotate mode. If I click and drag, I can look at the back of the skull, the side of the skull, the front, um, or I can look at top and bottom. Okay, so I'm going to recenter it by clicking recenter, and at any point it gives me that original view. Now notice I'm on rotate mode again. If I go down here and I click that toggle, that lets me pan it to where I want. Now, I have an idea of how to do that. You should play around with it. I am using a mouse. I find the mouse is the easiest way to do this program. You can certainly use your track pad on the Chromebook or a computer at home, but if you have a mouse, I highly recommend plugging it in. You'll really benefit from that. Because if I also have the mouse that has the little scrolling trackpad, I'm scrolling, I'm zooming in and zooming out, and I have a little more control over it. And then just click and drag. So let's look at what's happening. Right now, I have more options. So here's that bar again, explore more tools, search, and so on. Under more options, I can get some help if you needed to. I'm going to click on this pencil again. And notice it flipped back, and now I have this select arrow. That's what I want, is the select arrow. So now if I click on this, it will highlight it, and a box pops up, and it tells me that that is the frontal bone. Now notice what happened over here in the right-hand column, excuse me, the left-hand column. If I scroll down, I see there's a little blue line next to frontal bone, and that shows me that I'm on the frontal bone. Let me click a different one. So I'm clicking on this, and nasal bone is popping up on my screen, but over here in the side view, the blue button is on nasal bone. Now I can click this eyeball on it to hide it, and it disappeared, or to click it again, and it reappeared. So let me click on the frontal bone, and here's frontal bone up here. It's got the little blue line next to it. Watch when I click on the eyeball, the frontal bone was taken off, or the frontal bone can be put back. And that eyeball is down here too for hide something or to review it. And then here is undo, so I can always go back. Okay, so maybe I need to go back to everything. I can go back to the skeletal system main menu and click on isolate, and I can kind of restore these views if I need to. Okay, I can hide it, I can bring it back. Okay, so now I've restored the whole view. All I want to really deal with is the skull for my first one. So bones of the head, skull, click and isolate it for yourself. Now I look at my checklist and it tells me I need to know the bones: frontal, parietal, occipital, sphenoid, and ethmoid. So using this, I can use my select tool and I can click on each and study them. And I can use the rotate tool to look at them in different views, and that will be necessary. Some things can only be seen from the bottom, for example. I may need to zoom in to get a better idea. And for example, let's go to a top view. I'm going to need to know the names of these lines. Now notice I'm hovering over this right now. If I click it, I get the names of the bones, but I don't get the names of these what look like cracks in the bones called sutures. So this program is excellent. It will let you see the different views, but it is not going to highlight and name every single thing for you. This suture here is called sagittal suture. Let me look at my checklist when I scroll down. Sutures. Sagittal suture is one of the ones I need to know. How am I going to know that? I need to look at my textbook. I need to find sagittal suture. And then on this, I need to simply hover over it and then verbally say it out loud to myself to practice it. This is sagittal. That this one is coronal or frontal. That this one back here is lambdoidal. But if I click on this bone, well, fortunately, that one tells me the name of the bone. Now, in an inferior view of the occipital bone, there's a big hole in it. Now, notice when I try to click in that hole, I'm getting the bones that are inside because I can see through that empty space, but I'm not getting the name of this hole. And you do need to know the name of that hole, and that is the foramen magnum. Let's go back to our checklist. Occipital bone, important marking. Foramen magnum is the hole. Occipital condyles are the rocker-like structures next to the hole that your vertebrae attach to. So let me look back at my diagram. I can see that there's a rocker-like structure here and here, and that there's a hole, so I can see them in here. But I'm going to have to use my diagrams to double check myself, use my checklist, and verbally quiz myself. You will need to know different views. For example, here's the top view. Let me select one of these bones, and I'm going to hide it by clicking hide. Oh, when I click hide, I'm sorry. When I'm on hide, that becomes a hide tool. I'm going to hide that bone. I'm going to hide that one. And I'm going to hide this one. I am now looking inside the skull. I'm going to go back to select tool. When I select this middle bone, the whole thing will highlight, and it tells me that that bone is the sphenoid bone, which I can see internally. This area inside, let me zoom in, looks like a little saddle right here. That is called the sella turcica or turcica, and you do need to know that term. Back to our checklist. Sphenoid bone, only thing you need to know other than its name is sella turcica. Understand that the sphenoid bone is one of the more complicated ones, and we will cover it more in class. But you do need to recognize these bones from different points of view. What do I mean? Let's look at an example in this program. I'm going to recenter my model. So now it's back here. Notice I removed some things. So let's restore this back to normal. So I'm going to go to skull. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to unhide it. The entire skull is restored. Notice when I hit it and unhit it, it brings it back to normal. And let's center it. I'm going to go to pan. I'm going to bring it down to the middle for myself. And I'm going to zoom in. Now, I'm going to go back to rotate, and get a straight view into the eye socket here. If I click in the eye socket, see there's little, looks like cracks. Those are joints between bones. So let me click this one. This is our cheekbone. It tells us that's the lacrimal bone. Let me click this one. That is the sphenoid. I can see the sphenoid inside the eye socket. Watch what happens if I turn this and look at a side view. Oh, that was pan. Side view. Back to select. I'm going to click this little bone right here. That is also the sphenoid from a side view. Now, let's go back to the top of our skull. Whoops, I zoomed in, excuse me. I want to bring it down. I am going to, top view is fighting me. Let me zoom out. It takes a little bit of getting used to. But now I'm going to use that hide tool. I'm going to get rid of the frontal bone. I'm going to get rid of the two parietal bones. And now I'm looking inside the skull. So let's zoom in on it a little bit. And let me reposition it. So now I'm looking inside the skull. And on an inside view, what happens if I select this bone right here? Sphenoid bone, I can see it inside the skull from an inside view. I can see it on the side of the head from an outside view, and I can see it inside the eye socket from this surface right here. That confuses people sometimes, but it's no different than taking a three-dimensional object, for example, a stapler. If I look at the front of the stapler, the side of the stapler, the top of the stapler, the bottom of the stapler, or I open it up and look internally at where I put the staples, all of those things look different. And yet they're all the same object. They appear different from different views. That's going to be really important for these bones, that you can identify them from multiple angles. So we start slow, and you simply learn the major bones first, then go back and try to identify their markings, and then go on and add additional bones and continually go back and review. It will take a little while to get accustomed to playing with this program so you're comfortable with it, but once you do, it is an excellent way for you to be able to see all the bones in different models. And if I want to see the sphenoid all by itself, here's sphenoid. I click isolate, and I can see what the shape of that sphenoid bone is all by itself, from a bottom view, a front view, a side view, and a top view. From the front view, this surface here is what you saw inside the eye socket. From a side view, this part here is what you saw on the side of the head. Here's a bottom view, so we could actually see that from the bottom of the skull. But from a top view, this is what I would see inside the skull if I remove some of the bones. And right there's that little sella turcica, which I can only see from the inside. I think the bones are a challenging area, but if you work on it regularly and you stay on top of this and you seek help when you need it, you can definitely learn these over time. Let me know if you need any help, and I hope this tutorial was helpful to you.